The moment we loaded up this game, we thought it was just another creepy small town mystery. You know, the kind foggy streets, eerie music, nothing we hadn't seen before. But within seconds, something about it felt off. The loading screen flickered, the audio cracked, and suddenly the room felt colder, like the game itself was breathing down our necks. We spawned just outside the town limits. The road ahead was cracked, lined with dead trees whose branches looked more like claws than wood. The fog rolled in so thick, it felt like the game didn't want us to see what was waiting, and yet, the moment we took our first step forward, the old street lamps flickered on, one by one. I remember laughing nervously, trying to play it cool. "Oh, nice touch," I said, like it was just good game design. But deep down, it didn't feel like atmosphere. It felt like the game was guiding us somewhere, almost inviting us. The further we walked, the heavier it got. My chest tightened, not because of the game's graphics, but because something about that silence felt alive. Every sound, the crunch of gravel under our boots, the faint buzz of the streetlights echoed way too loudly in my headphones. I kept glancing at my friend, half expecting them to say, "Yeah, let's turn this off," but neither of us did. And then we heard it. Footsteps, not ours, slow, heavy, measured. At first, we thought maybe it was just background noise, a sound effect meant to spook players. But no, these steps weren't distant. They were close, too close. I stopped moving. My character froze in place. The sound didn't step, step, step. My skin crawled. The hairs on my arms stood straight up. My friend whispered, "Do you hear that?" As if whispering in real life would somehow stop the game from noticing us. We spun the camera around. Nothing, just the empty road stretching into the fog, but the footsteps didn't stop. They circled behind us. Beside us, like something was pacing just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to show itself. I remember my pulse pounding so hard that I could actually hear it over my headset. And that's when I made the mistake of turning toward the diner on the corner, its neon sign barely glowing through the mist. We figured, maybe if we got inside, we'd feel safer, but stepping through those doors didn't feel like safety. It felt like walking into a trap, because the moment we crossed the threshold, the footsteps stopped. The silence was almost worse. And then the jukebox came to life. The jukebox wasn't just playing music. It was stuttering, broken, as if someone had smashed the record in half and forced it to keep spinning. A warped half melody bled through the speakers, sharp and distorted. We froze. My thumb hovered over the joystick, but I didn't move. Neither did my friend, because that's when we saw it, a shadow. It wasn't cast by us, and it wasn't shaped like anything human. At first, it clung to the far wall, twitching like static. It stretched and bent unnaturally, flickering in and out of the flickering light like the game couldn't decide what it wanted it to be. We ducked behind the counter, and even though we knew the game couldn't hear us, we whispered. My friend muttered, "Don't move." And I swear, even though I tried not to breathe, the shadow did. It dragged itself forward, sliding across the floor inch by inch, like tar spilling across concrete. I couldn't tell if it was crawling toward us, or if the diner itself was pushing it closer. Every muscle in my body tensed. My palms were slick with sweat, and I almost dropped the controller. The jukebox glitched again. The song slowed down, like it was being dragged underwater. And the shadow crept closer. It stretched across the linoleum, up the side of the counter. My pulse was pounding in my ears so hard it drowned out the sound. And then it stopped. The shadow froze, hovering just inches away, stretching over the countertop, as if it knew exactly where we were hiding. I remember holding my breath so long my chest started to ache. I wanted to move, to do anything, but my fingers wouldn't listen. And then the screen went black. For a second, I thought the game crashed. My monitor hummed with static. The sound was piercing, like a swarm of bees trapped in the speakers, and just when I was about to shut the whole thing off, the static cleared. Only now, We weren't in the diner anymore. The game had dropped us somewhere else entirely. Rows of wooden pews stretched out in front of us. A faint orange glow flickered from candles on the altar. We were standing in a church, and resting on that altar was a single piece of paper. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were the words, "No one leaves this town." My mouth went dry. My friend laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the nervous kind, the kind you do when you're not sure if you're in on the joke or if the joke is on you. We picked up the note, and the second we did, we heard whispers. The whispers didn't sound like normal game audio. They weren't background ambience, and they weren't looping. They were layered. Dozens of voices, overlapping, echoing in a way that made it feel like the sound was leaking out of the screen and into the room. Some were whispers we couldn't make out, but others were clearer. They said things like, "Don't look behind you and stay." I felt my throat tighten. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep going, but my friend nudged me, laughing nervously, "Come on, let's see what's next." And so, against my better judgment, we walked deeper into the church. Every pew was empty, but they weren't untouched. Scratches, deep gouges, cut across the wood, as if people had clawed at them desperately. The closer we got to the altar, the more the whispers twisted into cries. It felt like a crowd of people were all around us, just invisible. Then the candles snuffed out. One by one, the flames died, until the only light left came from the faint glow of the stained glass windows. But here's the thing, I swear the glass changed. Where it once showed saints and angels, the images warped. Faces melted, eyes hollowed out, mouths stretched into wide, sick smiles. My stomach sank. This wasn't just a spooky setting anymore. It felt like the game was mocking us. Like the town was reshaping itself just for us. We stumbled toward the altar, hoping there was some kind of clue, maybe something to make sense of all this. And we found it, a door, narrow half, hidden behind the pulpit. We pushed it open, and inside was a hallway leading deeper underground. The whispers grew louder, but now they were frantic, desperate, like they were warning us not to continue. And maybe we should have listened, but we didn't, because there was this pull, this awful curiosity that made us want to know what the town was hiding. As we descended the stairs, the atmosphere changed. The ornate church walls gave way to damp stone, dripping with moisture. And at the bottom of the stairs, we found a diary, torn, stained with something I didn't want to think about. It belonged to the town sheriff. His entries started off normal, routine complaints about drunks, about petty theft. But then the tone shifted. He wrote about people disappearing one after another, families gone, children missing. And the last entry was barely legible, but we could make out the words, "They're not human. The town is theirs now." I looked at my friend. Neither of us spoke, because there was one more sentence. It was scribbled over and over, filling the rest of the page. "Do not go into the basement." We stared at the screen. We knew what was coming next, and then, at the end of the hallway, we saw it. A single wooden door. Old, splintered, with heavy iron hinges. The basement, and against every ounce of reason, we opened it. The basement door groaned open like it hadn't been touched in decades. The hinges screamed, the sound cutting through the silence and making me flinch, even though it was just in my headphones. The moment we stepped inside, the air changed. You know that heavy, suffocating feeling when you walk into a room that feels wrong, like the atmosphere itself doesn't want you there. That's exactly what it felt like, and then I noticed something else. The game had gone silent completely. No ambient wind, no footsteps echoing on the stone, no music, just nothing, and that silence was louder than any soundtrack. The walls dripped with condensation, rough stone lined with deep scratches that looked less like wear and more like claw marks. Long, uneven, desperate, chains dangled from hooks in the walls, some broken, some swaying as if something had just let go of them. I tried to laugh it off, Pretty dark stuff for a game, huh? But my voice cracked halfway through, and I knew my friend heard it. Neither of us wanted to admit how unsettled we were. We moved deeper. The flashlight shook slightly, flickering every few seconds. My hands were sweaty on the controller, but the in-game light shaking felt like it was copying me, mirroring my fear. Step after step, the hallway stretched on, impossibly long for the size of the church above. I remember actually asking out loud, "How is this basement even this big?" And then we heard it. Breathing, not ours, slow, guttural, heavy. It came from behind us, filling the space like whoever, or whatever, was in that basement had been waiting for us. We spun the camera around. The corridor was empty. Just stone walls and chains. The breathing stopped. My heart hammered in my chest, and for a second, I thought maybe it was part of the game's sound design. Just a scare to mess with us. But then it came again, louder this time, almost brushing against my ear as if something was right there. I froze. My friend whispered, don't turn around again," but we had no choice. The basement only went deeper. The stairs twisted, tighter and tighter, until finally the flashlight beam caught something at the very end. A figure tall, too tall. Its head scraped the ceiling, its limbs long and unnaturally thin. Hollow eyes glowed faintly, locked straight on us. And then, as if that wasn't enough, it smiled, wide, unbroken. It didn't move, it didn't lunge. It just stood there, smiling, breathing that same heavy breath we'd been hearing all along. I couldn't move my character. My hands hovered, shaking above the controller, but my body refused to press a button. I whispered, "What do we do?" My friend didn't answer. I think they were frozen too, and then, just as the tension hit its peak, the screen broke. Static ripped across the monitor, blinding, the sound shrieking so loud I ripped off my headphones. And when the static cleared, we weren't in the basement anymore. When the static cleared, I expected we'd be back in the church, or maybe even outside in the foggy streets again. But no, the screen showed something worse. We were back at the game's main menu, only it wasn't the same. Where the words "New Game" and "Continue" usually sat, there was only one option now: Continue. I stared at it, my mouth dry. My friend laughed, trying to shake it off. Okay, that's actually a cool mechanic, but there was nothing cool about it. The game had erased the idea of starting over, it remembered. It wanted us to keep going. We hesitated, our hands hovering over the controller, but curiosity got the better of us. We clicked continue, and the game didn't take us back to the church, or the diner, or the streets. It dropped us right back into the basement. Only now, the figure wasn't at the far end of the corridor. It was standing inches away. The screen jolted, the perspective warped, and for a split second it felt like the camera wasn't following our character anymore. It was looking at us. The figure's hollow eyes burned through the monitor. That smile stretched wider, impossible, until it split the edges of its face. Then came the whispers, not like before. These weren't faint, overlapping voices. These were sharp, clear, spoken directly into our ears. "You don't leave." I ripped my headset halfway off, but the voices didn't stop. They were in the speakers now, layered, screaming and whispering all at once. The controller vibrated violently in my hands, and the flashlight in-game swung wildly. The figure reached out, and then black silence. We sat there, stunned, staring at the blank screen. I thought maybe the game had crashed. Maybe it had finally overloaded. But then a single line of text appeared. "You can't leave." I actually felt sick, like my stomach twisted at the sight of those words. My friend leaned back in their chair, shaking their head. Nope, that's enough. We're done. We tried closing the game, clicking exit, Alt F4. Nothing worked. The text just stayed there. "You can't leave," and then the screen flashed again. Our desktop appeared. But something was wrong. The game's icon had changed. Where it used to say the title, It now had a new name. Just one word, trapped. We stared at the desktop in silence. The normal game icon was gone, replaced with a single word, trapped. My friend actually leaned away from the monitor, like the screen itself was dangerous. I wanted to laugh it off, I really did, but there was this pit in my stomach that told me this wasn't just a glitch. It was intentional. For a few seconds, neither of us touched the mouse. We just sat there, listening to the faint hum of the computer, almost waiting for something else to happen. Finally, my friend whispered, "Click it," and against every ounce of common sense, I did. The screen went black. No loading screen, no title, no options, just black. Then, after what felt like forever, the sound of footsteps started. Slow, deliberate, exactly like the ones we'd heard when we first entered the town. But here's the part that really shook me. It wasn't our character walking. There was no HUD, no inventory, no flashlight, just footsteps, getting louder, closer, and then, out of nowhere, the screen flashed white. When the image returned, it wasn't the town or the basement or the church. It was my room, not perfectly, not like a video feed, but enough, the outline of my desk, my chair, the faint glow of the window I always keep cracked open. It was like the game had replicated it, imperfect, twisted, but recognizable. I ripped my hands off the keyboard. My friends swore under their breath, louder than I'd ever heard. We both sat there, frozen, waiting to see if anything else would happen. And then the screen flickered again, static, loud and violent. When it cleared, the town was back, silent, empty, and then it just closed. No warning, no crash message, just gone, back to the desktop, and the icon vanished like the game had never been installed at all. We didn't speak for a long time after that. When we finally did, it was just nervous laughter, the kind you use to convince yourself it was all just a weird bug, just coding. But deep down, I couldn't shake it. The breathing, the figure's smile, that note in the church saying no one leaves this town. And worst of all, that moment the game showed my room. That night, I swear I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards, every flicker of light in the hallway, it all felt too close, like the game hadn't really ended. Like the town was still out there, waiting, watching. Safe to say, we're never opening that game at night again. But I'll ask you this, what would you do? Would you keep playing to see how far it goes? Or would you shut it off the second that jukebox started playing? Drop your answer in the comments, and while you're at it, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more terrifying stories like this one. Because trust me, this was just one town, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that some towns, whether in a game or not, don't ever want you to leave. Until next time, sleep with the lights on.